Good day, everyone. We are the Group 10 and we will be talking about the learning sciences and constructivism. I am Sheena Villalba and together with me are Megan Tumayor, Anami Malabon, and Rai Subonga as your presenters. To start with, let's discuss first the objectives. First, describe the collaborative approach that led to the interdisciplinary field of learning sciences and the basic assumptions of this field. Second, explain different perspectives on constructivism as a theory of learning and teaching. Third, identify the common elements in most contemporary constructivist theories. Fourth, apply constructivist principles to classroom practice, especially collaboration and cooperation. Fifth, evaluate the use of community-based activities or service of learning. And lastly, describe positive and negative influences of technology on the learning and development of children and adolescents. So let's move on and tackle about the learning sciences. The interdisciplinary field of the learning sciences encompasses research in psychology, education, computer science, philosophy, sociology, anthropology, neuroscience, and other fields that study learning. Ang goal ng learning sciences is to clarify or emphasize kung anong condition ba mas natututo ang isang estudyante at paano ito nag-iiba-iba sa bawat individual. As what Sar stated, yung learning sciences din is helpful to redesign yung classroom setting kung saan mas magiging effective na learning environment yung isang classroom upang mas makatulong sa madaling pagkatuto ng isang estudyante. There are 5 basic assumptions of the learning sciences. First is that experts have deep conceptual knowledge. Pero hindi dahil marami silang alam na facts and procedures, expert na agad sila. What makes them an expert is their deep conceptual knowledge and kung paano nila yun mapuput into action. There are times na yung knowledge na yun is kailangan nilang i-modify depende sa sitwasyon. Second is that learning comes from the learner. Kung hindi mag-e-effort yung isang student na matuto, walang sa-isa yung pagtuturo ng isang teacher. For example, kahit gaano pa kagaling magturo ang isang teacher, kung yung student or yung receiver ng knowledge is wala namang kagustuhan na matuto, wala lang din mangyayari. Parang wala siyang effect. Sabi nga nila, Descartes, Sligers, and Voitin noong 2004, we are knowledge inventors and not copy machines. One should want to transfer knowledge and one must want to accept it. Third is that schools must create effective learning environments. Given the fact that schools are where we learn a lot of things, it is essential na yung learning environment natin enables us to focus on deep understandings para na rin yung knowledge na nag-gain natin is magagamit natin even in real life at hindi lang naiiwan sa room, sa four corners ng room. Next, prior knowledge and beliefs are key. Maraming mga bagay yung na alam na ng students before pa sila pumasok sa school. Ang tawag doon is preconceptions. Although hindi lahat ng preconceptions ay tama, through teachings, nadidistinguish ng mga students kung alin sa mga doon ang false information and ano sa mga ron ang factual information. Lastly, reflection is necessary to develop deep conceptual knowledge. Kaya nga tayo may quizzes after lessons, sit breaks after discussions, para malaman natin if may na-retain ba sa mga tinuro sa atin. And hindi yun enough. Yung performances na yun, hindi yun enough. Ang kinakailangan natin is mag-reflect, i-analyze, yung mga nagawa natin, kung saan tayo nagkamali, saan yung tama, and so on and so forth. Yun yung deep conceptual knowledge. You understand everything aside from the facts and methods na tinuro, yung mga bagay na na-memorize na, but dapat naiintindihan mo talaga yung mismong mga concept. Next naman is embodied cognition. Embodied cognition is the awareness that the way we think about and present information reflects the fact that we need to interact with the world. Ayon yan kay Ashcraft and Radvansky noong 2010. Sa learning kasi, yung embodied cognition daw, mas more concerned siya sa mind, body, and the environment kung kaya para mai-improve natin yung ating perception, language acquisition, social interaction, memory, and reasoning. For example, yung observational learning. Kapag may nakikita tayong gumagawa ng isang action, somehow natututunan natin paano siya gawin. Through models, gestures, and movements, simulations, reenactment, and other kinds of actions and movements, it supports our learning. Next
naman is the cognitive and social constructivism. Next slide. Yung constructivism daw, ito daw ay broad term na ginagamit ng mga philosophers, curriculum designers, psychologists, educators, and others. So si Ernst von Gasserfield, tinawag niya ang constructivism as a vast and woolly area in contemporary psychology, epistemology, and education. And then, also grounded din daw ang constructivist perspective sa mga research ni Piaget and Vygotsky. Kaya mostly, ang mga theories na matatakel dito is theory ni Piaget at Vygotsky. And then sabi, there is no one constructivist theory of learning daw. Pero most ng mga constructivist theory is nag-agree sa two central ideas. So yung central idea number one is yung learners are active in constructing their own knowledge. Kasi diba in constructivism kasi, about siya sa ang isang child is hindi lang passively nag-take ng information or ng knowledge from yung teacher niya. Kundi parang they have their own way para makagain ng own knowledge na. And very evident yun during sa Keto 12 curriculum. Diba? Parang yung mga students, parang 'di ba kapag K-12 bago na yung approach, 'di ba minsan nauuna na yung assessment muna bago yung mismong lesson. Tapos minsan din, parang self-study and then pinapabayaan sila ng mga teachers to report yung whole topic. And then yung central idea number 2 naman is yung social interactions are important daw in this knowledge and construction process. Kasi sa K-12 curriculum din, although nagiging parang self-study na yung mga lessons kasi yun na yung new way na teaching ng mga teachers, hindi pa rin naman sila pinapabayaan to work independently. Parang sa K-12, yung mga students, they tend na work group, parang by pairs or by triad. And then yung one way din daw to organize yung constructivist view is to talk about yung two forms ng constructivism. Yun nga yung psychological and social constructivism na mas further discuss pa sa next slide. Yeah, next is yung psychological, individual, and cognitive constructivism. So, yung many ng mga psychological theories daw include some kinds of constructivism because yung theories embrace yung idea that individual construct nga their own cognitive structure as they interpret yung experiences nila in a particular situation. So, yung mga psychological constructivists daw, concerned sila kung paano ba yung individual nagbi-build up ng certain elements of their cognitive and emotional apparatus. Pero dahil daw yung mga psychological constructivists, pinag-aaralan din nila yung individual knowledge, beliefs, self-concept, and identity ng isang tao. They often called them as the cognitive constructivism kasi nagfo-focus sila sa psychological life ng isang tao. So, yung example dito sa book is yung si Chelsea. Kasi si Chelsea, parang first time niya na ma-hospital. So, sa pediatric wing, tumawag yung nurse, tapos nurse through sa intercom. Tapos kasi since first time pa lang yun ni Chelsea, nung tinatanong siya ng nurse na kung ano bang gusto ni Chelsea or kung may kailangan pa siya, hindi niya alam kung paano mag-response. Kasi ang akala niya is nakikipag-usap siya sa wall. Kaya ang sabi niya, hindi siya nakikipag-usap sa stranger. So si Chelsea doon, she was making meaning using yung individual knowledge niya na hindi nga niya kilala yung kausap niya. Kaya akala niya wall siya. Kaya ang naging response niya is hindi siya nakikipag-usap doon sa wall. So another example pa, 'di ba kapag yung isang child, ang observation nila ng most na mga plant para mag-grow is kailangan nila nung soil para mag-grow. And then ang nako-conclude nila is ang plant daw is kumakain ng dirt kasi parang tayo lang human. Parang in order for us to grow, kailangan natin kumain ng food. Since nga yung plant is tinatanim sa lupa, ang naiisip nila is kumakain ng dirt yung mga plants. And then using yung ganong standard, yung mga constructivist is concerned sila nga on how individual construct yung mga internal representations na can be remembered and retrieved. And then sa outside world, na-view daw yon as source ng input. Pero once na yung mga sensation and yung mga sensation na yun is na-perceive and naka-enter na sa working memory natin, it is important na ina-assume na natin kung ano na ba yung nangyayari inside the head of an individual. And in contrast naman sa theory ni Piaget, di ba merong psychological cognitive constructivist, parang ito naman, less concerned naman daw siya sa mga correct representations. And dito din, nag-propose si Piaget na yung isang children daw is parang they become less organized and adaptive sa mga concrete events. Kasi ang sinabi ni Piaget is may yung mga logic daw and yung mga universal knowledge cannot be learned directly from sa environment natin such as yung conservation and reversibility. Such yung mga ganong knowledge, di ba parang kasi iba yung perspective ng ibang tao sa perspective natin and hindi rin lahat ng na-experience natin is true. Kaya si Piaget, sabi niya na ang social environment daw is important ng development ng child. Pero hindi nga lahat ng interaction is true. And yung sum ng mga educational and developmental psychologists, ni-referred si Piaget as yung first wave ng constructivism or yung solo constructivism na nag-emphasize ng central idea number 1 na individual meaning making. Kasi yung mismong tao kung sino nakipag-experience at kung ano yung na-perceive niya is yun yung pinaniniwalaan niya. Next slide po. Next slide naman is yung social constructivism ni Vygotsky nga. So dito naman si Vygotsky in-emphasize naman niya yung central idea number 2 na about naman siya sa social interaction is nakakapag-shape daw yon ng individual learning and development ng isang child. Just as yung example din na yung interaction ni Ethan tsaka yung mother niya dun sa grocery store. Doon kasi merong particular scene doon na parang kinalculate nila yung price per pound nung cucumber. So parang convert pa nila yung pounds sa kilograms para malaman nila kung ano ba yung mas expensive. So yung by participating sa broad range ng activity na yon with others na nagwo-work together, parang it includes yung both new strategies and knowledge. So appropriating kasi means being able to reason, act, and participate using yung mga cultural tools. Such, for example, yung paggamit diba, ng force and acceleration kapag sa physics. So sa psychological constructivism, yung mga learners, they means individually nagpo-possess na sila ng knowledge. Pero kapag pag social constructivism naman, yung mga learners, they belong to a group and then they participate and construct knowledge together sa groups nila. Kaya naman yung second wave ng constructivism is about social constructivism na, 'di ba? 'Di ba? Nung first wave is solo constructivism in which yung individual is meaning making. Individual lang. That's why solo. Tapos ang second wave naman is social constructivism naman. Next slide po. Next slide is about constructivism naman. So yung mga social constructionists daw, doon nag-focus lang sa individual learning. So ang concern nila is kung paano ba yung public knowledge in the discipline of science, math, and economics are nako-construct. So beyond kasi sa mga academic knowledge, yung mga constructionists daw, also interested din sila on how yung mga common sense, yung mga everyday beliefs, and yung mga understanding about sa mga tao is nako-communicate sa new members ng social cultural group. And then may mga questions na nag-a-arise dito sa social constructionist. Nag-i-include kung paano who determines what constitute the history or ano ba yung mga proper way to behave the public or paano ba may elect as a class president. Kasi yung mga social constructivists, they believe na lahat ng knowledge is socially constructed. And the more important, ang mga tao daw is more power than others to define what constitutes such as knowledge. And then yung relationship between and among teachers at mga students is yung central issues. Next slide. Next naman is how yung knowledge pa is constructed. Yung one tension din kasi among different approaches ng constructivism is how yung knowledge nga is constructed. And then si Mushman noong 1982, nag-describe siya ng 3 explanations. Ayan, yung external direction, internal direction, and both external and internal direction. So yung realities and truth daw ng external direct knowledge construction. So yung mga individual daw nagre-reconstruct sila outside reality by building yung mga accurate mental representations. And then sa internal process naman, such as yung organization, assimilation, and accommodation ni Piaget, direct knowledge of construction naman. Kapag both external and internal naman, yung knowledge nag-go through the interaction ng internal and external factors. Next slide. Next naman is yung knowledge ay situated or general ba. So, yung second question daw na nag-cuts across mga constructivist perspective is whether yung knowledge nga ba is internal, general, and transferable. So yung mga situated learning, nag-emphasize daw sila na yung learning in a real world is not just about studying in school. Parang it's more on yung isang apprentice na pero in experience, na merong support naman ng mga expert na guide and model. They take more on responsibility until yung mga students nila is mag-function independently. So yung mga proponent, they believe na yung situated learning explains learning in the factories, sa around dinner table, and sa mga high school halls. And then, ang situated learning din daw is describe nila as enculturation or yung mga adapting of norms, yung mga beliefs natin. And then yung community din daw might be mga mathematicians or mga gang members or writers, depending on kung ano ba yung particular way ng thinking nila or ginagawa nila. So may mga same characteristics. And then knowledge daw is viewed not just as individual cognitive structure pero rather than creation ng community over time since ang both na mayroong characteristic nga is ginu-group together. Tapos, ang practices ng mga communities, interacting and getting things done, as well as yung tools and community na nakikreate. So, yung learning daw means becoming more able to participate in those practices and uses ng mga tools. Na in most basic level, yung situated learning daw emphasize yung idea that much of what we learn is specific to the situation in which being learned. Na kung about the politics yung pinag-aaralan, about politics din yung matututunan mo. Next slide.
So yun no, dako naman tayo sa common elements of constructivist student-centered teaching. Next slide. So sabi dito na all constructivist theories assume that knowing develops as learners try to make sense of their experience. Ito sinasabi na ang mga students mas nag-grasp at nade-develop yung mga bagay-bagay na natututunan nila based sa mga pangyayaring kanilang na-encounter. Pwedeng idea dito is yung theory ni John Locke na tabula rasa o yung blank slate. Na ang mga tao daw pinanganak na walang alam and basic instinct lang yung baon natin. And mostly, lahat ng mga natutunan natin for everyday is result tayo ng mga experiences na nararanasan natin through our lives. For example is, kung kunwari, yung suklay. Dati hindi natin alam paano gamitin yun. Sabihin na lang natin na kunwari, yung isang baby, if bibigyan mo siya ng suklay, anong gagawin niya doon? Maaari, laruin niya yun. O kaya isusubo niya sa bibig niya. Dahil nga, wala siyang alam kung paano ba yung use ng suklay. And eventually, pag nagsimula na siyang magkamalay, o pag lumaki na siya, maaaring makikita niya kay mother na yung suklay ginagamit pala sa buhok. O kaya yung suklay pala yung tawag doon. So may inject yun sa isipan niya na yung suklay pala, ganito yung purpose nito, ganyan. So yung dati wala tayong idea sa kung ano ba gamit ng suklay. Dahil nga sa experiences natin about sa paggamit nga ng suklay, na-feel yung knowledge natin, yung blank slate o yung isip natin, kaya nagkaroon tayo ng new learnings. Sabi ni Driscoll 2005, learners therefore are not empty vessels waiting to be filled, but rather active organisms seeking meaning. Tayo daw mga tao, napapagsak tayo ng mental models natin or yung tinatawag na schemas na binubuo natin para mag-make sense dun sa mga experiences natin. We are knowledge investors. So, nag-invest tayo sa mga bagay-bagay para matuto at maka-earn ng knowledge and not feeling cabinets na to the point na nagiging robot tayo dahil ini-impose na lang yung mga dapat gagawin dahil kailangan gawin, not minding if successful ba yung transmission ng learnings o hindi. Tapos yung mga binubuo nating mental models, hindi to nagre-reflect o matutulad sa external reality mismo. Rather, ito yung mga unique interpretations natin. So, yun nga, no? Balik tayo dun sa situation ni Chelsea, yung sa talking wall, yung kaninang in-example sa constructionism. Katulad na lang no, yung situation na nabanggit. At all, wala siyang background about sa mga bagay-bagay in the hospital. At nung na-encounter niya na nga yung nagsalitang nurse gamit yung intercom para kamustahin siya, nagtaka siya at first kasi first time niya nakaranas ng ganun eh. So wala siyang idea kung ano yung nangyayari sa loob ng ospital. Kaya in the end, para mag-make sense yung naranasan niya, in-assume niya na lang na yung pader kinakausap siya. Makikita natin based dun sa nangyari kay Chelsea, nakaranas siya ng bagong situation na hindi siya familiar. Meron siyang idea na naka-impose na you should not talk to strangers. Pero dahil nga ang nabuo niyang idea na yung pader yung kumakausap sa kanya, hindi siya sure kung yung pader ba ay matatawag din na strangers. Pero ayun nga in Chelsea na yung pader yung nagsasalita at kinakamusta siya. Ayun yung na-construct ng idea na nag-make sense na na-encounter yung situation. Yung mga constructivists, nag-share sila ng similar goals for learning. At ito yung i-emphasize yung knowledge rather na i-store yung mga facts, concepts, and skills. Sabi nga learners' goals include developing abilities to find and solve ill-structured problems, critical thinking, inquiry, self-determination, and openness to multiple perspectives. Sabi rin nga ni Driscoll 2005. Yung sa pwede nating example dito yung proverb na give a man a fish and he will eat for a day. Teach a man how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So, ibig sabihin mas better na tuturuan natin ng mga tao kung paano gawin yung isang bagay kaysa gagawin na lang natin ito para sa kanila. Halimbawa, may kapatid ka tapos tinutulungan mo siya mag-module. Ano magiging approach mo as a tutor? Pwede kasi maraming factor na na pwedeng maka-apekto. Pero kasi based nga dun sa proverbs, mas maganda kung ituturo mo yung lesson na andun sa module at ipapaliwanag mo sa kapatid mo, tapos hayaan mo siyang mag-reflect and mag-observe ng learning sa sarili niya. In that way kasi, mas nagiging successful yung transmission ng knowledge. Kaysa diba, ikaw na mismo yung sasagot ng module ng kapatid mo, kasi pag ganun parang, natapos niya na yung mga dapat na pinapagawa ng school, pero may natutunan ba siya? Yun talaga kasi yung goal, diba? Ang matuto at hindi lang basta may pasa. So, sabi kasi diba, teaching a person a useful skill can be more beneficial in the long run. Magagamit niya to sa pangmatagalan than feeling a need for them temporary kaysa gagawin mo yun para sa kanya. Next slide. Ito na yung approaches recommended 5 conditions for learning. One is to embed learning in complex, realistic, and relevant learning environments. Two is provide for social negotiation and shared responsibility as a part of learning. Support multiple perspectives and use multiple representations of content. Next is to nurture self-awareness and an understanding that knowledge is constructed. And third is to encourage ownership in learning. With Registo and Marshall, 1992. So yung limang approaches na to, it believes sa personal construction of meaning ng mga students o learner. Din yan siya through experiences, doon to nakafocus. And yung meaning na yun is influence ng mga interaction or prior knowledge and new events ng isang learner. Kaya it concludes na mga approaches na to, big help siya sa pag-conduct ng student-centered learning na maaaring o dapat i-implement in a classroom setting. So next slide. So dimensions of constructivist teaching naman. First is yung complex learning environment and authentic tasks. Sabi, constructivists believe that students should not be given stripped-down simplified problems and basic skills, but instead should encounter complex learning environments. Sinasabi yung mundo sa labas ng school, mas complicated yung mga problema na makakaharap doon. Kung tawagin nga natin na totoong mundo, So sinasabi dito sa complex learning environments and authentic tasks na dapat ang mga students kailangan nilang ma-experience solving complex problems. In that way kasi, mas ma-apply nila to sa real world. In terms sa complex problems, hindi agad na pag sinabing ganito, math problem agad, o kaya physics kasi sobrang challenging talaga yun. Complex talaga siya matatawag. So, complex problem na matatawag kapag may element na problems and multiple yung pwedeng maging solutions. Pwede dito, kunwari, is hihingin mo yung perspective ng mga bata tungkol sa ganitong bagay. And makikita mo doon na kanya-kanya yung approach ng bata and may iba't ibang way sila on thinking about the thing. So, during the discussion, there would be no right or answers. And that way kasi mas magaan yung palitan ng information and mas nadadigest ng mga bata yung knowledge na gusto mong i-transmit sa kanila. So, importante din na ang mga students sa pag-try na pagsukot ng complex problems, kailangan nila ng support o yung tinatawag na scaffolding in learning. So, isipin nyo, isang scaffolding na ginagamit in building establishments or mga property ganyan. Di ba ang scaffolding ginagamit ito in providing support sa ginagawang property nga, no? Pero as time goes by, pag may progress na dun sa construction ng establishment, unti-unting tinatanggal yung scaffolding hanggang sa matapos yung process ng construction. So ganito din natin maihalintulad yung sa support in learning. Siyempre, sa una, need ng guidance and support ng mga students in learning na task. So si teacher, pwede siyang magbigay ng mga direct instruction and suggestions para sa gagawin ng student. And if may further question ang mga students, dapat mag-supply siya ng mga answers na makakatulong doon sa problem ng student. And eventually, pag nag-increase na yung learning ni student, doon na makikita yung result ng guidance niya. And pwede na niyang hayaan si student in doing the task on their own. Pwede dito example yung sa mga bata na in learning the alphabet or yung numbers, color shapes, yung mga ganyan. So una, diba, si teacher, nag-make use siya ng mga flashcards or mga learning material na makaka-help lang sa student na matutunan yung mga yun. And as time goes by, na napapamiliarize na yung mga bata sa concept ng shapes na lang kunwari, pwede na magbigay ng mga activities si teacher to evaluate the learning that has been transmitted. Next po. Next is yung social negotiation. Sabi, major goal of teaching is to develop students' abilities to establish and defend their own positions while respecting the positions of others and working together to negotiate or co-construct meaning. Yung mga constructivists, naniniwala sila sa idea ni Vygotsky na sinasabi na higher mental processes develop through social negotiation and interaction. Sa isang classroom setting, major goal dito ang makapag-build ng rapport para sa relationship, hindi lang between teacher and students. Kasali din dito yung relationship between each student. So, challenge talaga sa mga teacher kung paano ma-establish ang healthy classroom relationship, Kasi hindi may iwasan ng differences sa bawat isa. So, maaari gawin ni teacher is to work on respecting each differences and try na i-introduce ang mga students by talking with each other and mag-exchange ng mga thoughts and ideas sa bawat isa. Ideally, sa social negotiation, nagpapalitan ng mga ideas and thoughts ang mga students together with their teacher. Siyempre, para maintindihan at further malaman kung ano ba yung stand nila in this specific thing na pwede maging way in building a healthy classroom environment. So next po. So doon naman sa multiple perspective and representations of content, sabi, resources for the class should have provided multiple representations of content using different analogies, examples, and metaphors. Dito naman, nasabi na dapat magbigay ng mga examples na pwedeng ma-relate doon sa gustong i-imply ni teacher. At hindi lang dapat siya mag-stick sa isang example. try na dapat i-connect into something na mas maintindihan ng mga students. Dito pumapasok na dapat maging resourceful and creative si teacher sa pagtuturo and pag-give ng explanations para sure na maintindihan ng mga students. So next po, sa understanding the knowledge construction process naman, the assumptions we make, our beliefs, and our experiences shape what each of us comes to know about the world, and different assumptions and different experiences lead to different knowledge. May iba't ibang factor na nagko-contribute kung paano natin ma-view ang mga bagay-bagay at nakaka-apekto din to no sa kung ano yung nalalaman natin. Yung ayun nga yung assumptions natin sa mga experiences natin, ganyan, pasok din dito yung usapin sa culture based sa kung paano tayo na-shape ng culture na kinabibilangan natin. For example, sa isang room, di ba may mga lamok, minsan di maiwasan ganyan, example lang naman. Tapos, yung isang student, nakagat siya ng lamok, tas nangate. Tas di ba parang umuumbok ba yun? Ay, nagbubukol, ganon. So, pwede, in that situation, ang gawin yung student na nakagat ng lamok is lagyan niya ng laway, yung part na kinagat ng lamok. Kasi yun yung beliefs niya na-construct niya yung paniniwala na yun Pwede na-construct niya sa previous experiences niya, pwedeng dati nakagat din siya ng gamot, tapos sabi ng ate niya, ay, lawayan mo lang yan, ganyan. Mawawala yung kati niyan, ganyan. So, naalaman niya yun base doon sa previous experiences niya. And pwede naman, yung isa namang students, mag-o-oppose doon sa ginawang hakbang ni student na kinagat ng lamok. Sabi niya na dapat nilagay mo na lang ng alcohol or pinahiran mo na lang ng ointment dahil yun yung turo sa kanyang gawin at yun yung na-construct na knowledge sa kanya na dapat para sa kanya ay tama. So doon makikita na may differences sa pag-construct ng mental schema nga pagdating sa kung ano ba yung knowledge natin based sa mga bagay na pinaniniwalaan natin at mga assumption at experiences. And next po, yung sa student ownership of learning, student ownership does not mean that the teacher abandons responsibility for instruction. Sabi ko nga kanina, di ba, sa teacher, kahit ang approach sa learning is student-centered, dapat kailangan pa rin yung guidance and support. Kasi, kahit sabihin na dapat si student na mag-effort sa mga bagay for their own sake of learning, yung kung tawagin na independent learning, yung responsibility ni teacher to give support is tuloy pa din and magiging successful nga ito sa pagbigay ng right instruction sa mga student. So next po.
Next naman is yung applying constructivist perspective. So although daw yung mga application ng constructivist views of learning ay different, si Mark Winshit noong 2002, nagsuggest siya ng mga following activities para ma-encourage yung meaningful learning. So una, yung teachers elicit student ideas and experiences in relation to the key topic. Di ba? Parang kapag yung topic, ang always na nagiging example ng mga teacher is based on their experiences para mas madali na mas maintindihan pa ng mga students nila. Second is yung students are given a frequent opportunities to engage in complex, meaningful, and problem-based activities na minsan ito pa yung nagiging way of recitation. Next is yung teacher provides students with a variety of information, resources, as well as yung tools na necessary for mediate learning. So, meron namang binibigay ng mga books and PDF na magagamit for the learning ng mga students. Next is yung student to work collaboratively and given support to engage in task-oriented dialogue na kahit na sa constructivism, parang hindi sila talaga passively taking ng information, hindi pa rin sila hinahayaan na mag-work independently and parang encourage sila to work collaboratively with their groupmates. Next is yung teacher make their own thinking process explicit to learning and encourage students to do some dialogues, writing, drawing, and other representation. And the students are routinely asked para i-apply yung mga knowledge in a diverse and authentic context rather than mag-focus lang exclusively sa acquisition ng predetermined na right answers. So parang binibigyan sila ng chance to tell kung ano ba yung opinion nila about sa certain topic. And then teachers also encourage na yung students ay maging reflective and autonomous thinking in conjunction with the conditions listed above. And last is yung teacher, nag-employ sila ng variety of assessment strategies to understand how yung students' ideas and involved to magkaroon ng feedback and processes sa product of their thinking. Kaya diba, after every lesson, nagkakaroon din ng quiz to assess whether yung students is may naintindihan ba sa topic. And the next slide. Yan. So even though daw yung mga educational psychologists may different views sila of scaffolding, and scaffolding means yung powerful conception of teaching and learning in which yung teachers and students nagkakreate sila ng meaningful connections nag-agree pa rin sila since they have different views nga in scaffolding, nag-agree pa rin sila into ay 3 characteristic. Yung una is yung contingency support. Ito yung teacher is constantly adjusting, differentiating, and tailoring responses to students. Syempre, iba yung nagiging responses ng teacher sa every other student. Like, if yung student is highly intellectual or gifted, iba yung approach, and iba rin yung approach if yung student is student with learning disability. Second is yung fading, na yung teachers daw is gradually withdraw support as a student understand and skills deepen, di ba? In every year level, like elementary, tas nagiging high school and college, nagiging iba yung approach ng teaching styles ng mga students kasi mas nagdi-deepen na yung skills natin. And we can work na independently. And yung pangatlo is yung transferring responsibility. Ito naman, students assume more and more responsibility for their own knowledge. Next slide. And sa mga next slide naman, dito ma-examine yung 3 specific teaching approach na nagpuput sa student into the center na nagpro-provide ng scaffolding. So, yung una is yung inquiry and problem-based learning. So, si John Dewey, dinescribe niya yung basic inquiry learning format noong 1910 na yung educators daw have developed many adaptation to this strategy, but the form usually includes the following elements. So, yung teacher, nag-represent sila ng mga puzzle event, questions, or problems. So, yung student, first, nagpo-formulate muna ng hypothesis para explain yung event or makapag-solve ng problem. And then, nagko-collect sila ng data to test yung hypothesis. After nun, is nag-draw na sila ng conclusion. And then, nagre-reflect na sila on the original problem and thinking process na needed to solve. Next slide. Next is yung example naman ng inquiry. So, si Shirley Magnusson and Anne-Marie Pelenxar, nakadevelop daw sila ng teacher's guide for planning and implementing, assessing a different phase ng inquiry. And tinatawag nila to guided inquiry support multiple literacies. So, yung mga teacher daw, first ina-identify nila yung curriculum area. For example, di ba, kung yung teacher nag-choose sila ng communication as yung area and nag-ask sila ng general question like, how and why ba yung animals and humans nakipag-communicate? And then, next yung teacher din nagpo-possess ng several specific focus questions, no? Specific na how do whales communicate? Specific na what kind of animals na. And then yung focus question na yon have to be carefully chosen to guide student toward yung pinaka-important understanding na. So yung one key understand daw para malaman na yung communication ng animal is yung relationship. So, pwedeng among sa structure nila, yung survival functions and habitat. Kasi yung mga animals daw may specific structure such as yung, di ba, may mga large ears. So, sila yung mga eccolators which function sa pwedeng kung paano sila makapaghanap ng food or makapag-attract ng mates or ma-identify yung mga predators nila. And then, yung mga structure na yon in function are related sa animal habitat nila. So, yung mga may large ear, pwedeng nag-navigate sila sa madidilim na lugar. So, yung ganung klaseng focus question mas na about si animals with different structures and communication, may different functional needs din sila for survival in different habitat. So, yung questions about animals daw with the same chemical structure or same habitat would be good focus points ng inquiry. So, yung next phase naman daw is to engage student na in inquiry. So, perhaps daw by playing different animal sounds, di ba? Parang by having students guess kung ano ba yung sound ng student, nakakapag-claim sila about sa communication. So, yung mga student, nagkakandak din sila muna first-hand and second-hand investigation. So, sa first-hand investigation, ayun yung mga direct experiences and experiment. For example, kapag minimeasure nila yung eyes ng bats, tapos ears in relation sa body nila using ng mga pictures and videos. Kasi syempre hindi naman pwede na real kasi endangered species na yung mga bats. And then second-hand investigation naman is yung student nagko-consult na mismo sa books in internets. And then naghahanap sila ng other resources para makapagkuha ng specific information or to get new idea. And the part yun ng investigating. So, ang student is nag-identify ng mga patterns. And then, ang inquiry daw is pwedeng maging cycle can be repeated. So, yung mga students daw go through sa several cycles ng investigating. Pwedeng after investigating, nag-identify ng patterns, nag-report ng results, and then nagko-construct na ng information and then making final reports na. Next slide. Next slide is about naman, pangalawa naman is yung problem-based learning. So yung inquiry learning daw nag-grew out na daw siya in practice of science. So yung problem-based learning naman daw is grew out sa research on the expert knowledge in medicine. So yung goal ng problem-based learning is to help student na makapag-develop ng knowledge that is useful and flexible pero not inert. Yung mga inert knowledge daw kasi is information na na-memorize pero seldom ay seldom lang na-apply. So yung other goals naman ng problem-based learning is to enhance yung intrinsic motivation, yung motivation within ourselves, and yung skills in problem solving, collaboration, and parang evidence-based decision making. And then sa problem-based learning din, students is confronted with problem na launches sa mismong inquiry as they collaborate para makapag-find ng solution. And then yung students nga nag-identify and nag-analyze ng problem based on the facts from sa given scenario, and then they begin na to generate yung hypothesis about the solution. And then as they suggest na hypothesis, they identify yung mga missing information and what do they do to need to know about the solution. Ano na yung next na steps. Sa true problem-based learning naman, yung real problem daw is yung action ng student. So for example, noong during 2010, yung deep water oil spill, many teachers daw ginamit yun as a problem springboard for learning. Pero yung mga students na mga researchers, parang kinompared nila yung nandun sa inquiry na yon based on sa size, location, and mga cost line. So, ano daw ba yung what could be done, how the current and tides play role, pati yung location nga. So, merong research si Billy and si Susie. And dito naman inanalyze nila yung quality of water from the local river. So si Billy nagiging concerned, si Susie rather is nagiging concerned siya na yung conclusion ni Billy is careless and incomplete. Since na-challenge si Billy, nag-research siya in the more depth manner. Tapos yung multi-ethic group is nag-raise ng question direct kay Billy and Susie. Yun yung legacy league. And then yung format ng challenges nila is paano ba na-encounter yung challenge, nag-generate ng ideas, nag-consider ng multiple perspective, and research and revise ng ideas, and then nag-draw na ng mismong conclusion. And then next slide is about research and inquiry and problem-based learning. So are inquiry and problem-based learning effective ba daw in teaching approach? So kung ano ba yung activities na nagli-lead to a greater achievement. So some research says yes. For example, yung mga students sa high school classroom, natutunan nila na compared sa students in traditional classroom. So sa study, almost 20% daw ng mga middle schools in a large urban district na nag-use ng inquiry-based materials na nag-participate sa mismong inquiry learning, may significantly higher rates daw sila sa mga standardized tests. And mostly, yung mga African-American boys yung nagbe-benefit sa ganong klaseng method. And then, several studies naman daw nag-point na increase the student engagement and motivation yung learning inquiry. As long as daw yung learning is supposed and yung students ay mayroong adequate na background knowledge. So, but not every educational psychologist nag-agree daw na ang problem-based learning is valuable. So, at least for all students. Next slide.
Okay, hi. So now let's move on to the cognitive apprenticeships and reciprocal teaching. So first, I will going to define first the cognitive apprenticeship. Okay, so what is the meaning of this? It involves a master teaching an apprentice the same skill that they have mastered. And this approach to human learning hones in on the discrepancies found in teaching. More specifically, it highlights how experts often fail to instruct novices properly. So in cognitive apprenticeship, this includes making one's thoughts visible. So the instructor may communicate his or her own reasoning out loud to assist the students in understanding the thought process of a task. So one of the examples of this is observations of experts, both skills and attributes. So in that case, over the centuries, apprenticeships have proved to be an effective form of education. By working alongside a master and perhaps other apprentices, young people have learned many skills, trades, and crafts. So knowledgeable guides provide models, demonstrations, and corrections, as well as an inquiry, discovery learning, and problem-based learning are very appealing. But some people are asking, are they effective? So specifically, does problem-based learning lead to deep understanding for most students? Okay, so now let's move on to the point, problem-based learning. So as per this, according to Paul, it is the problem-based learning is overrated. According to Kitchener and his colleague, they stated that it was clear and critical in their article in the Educational Psychologist. Even the title of the article was blunt. So why minimal guidance during instruction does not work? An analysis of the failure of constructivist, discovery, problem-based experiential, and inquiry-based teaching. So many of researchers are stated that although unguided or minimally guided instructional approaches are very popular and intuitively appealing. So the point here is made that these approaches ignore both the structures that constitute human cognitive architecture and evidence from empirical studies over the past half century that consistently indicate the minimally guided instruction is less effective and less efficient than instructional approaches that place a strong emphasis on guidance of the student learning process. And also, those respected researchers cited decades of research, or they are gathered some of the information that they demonstrating that unguided discovery or inquiry and problem-based learning are ineffective, especially for those students who has a limited prior knowledge. So next slide, please. Also, according to Louis Alfieri and his colleagues on 2011 when they examined the results from 108 studies going back over 50 years and found out that explicit teaching was more beneficial than unassisted discovery, especially for studies published in the most well-rated journals. Their conclusion was unassisted discovery generally does not benefit learning. So why researchers say that? And much of the research on problem-based learning has taken place in medical schools and results have been mixed. There is one study that students learning through problem-based instruction were better at clinical skills, such as problem formation and reasoning, but they were worse in their basic knowledge of science and felt less prepared in science. It is according to Albanese and Michel, 1993. So a review of problem-based learning curricula in medical schools concluded that this approach was not effective in promoting higher levels of student knowledge. So next, please. Okay, so now let's move on to the counterpoint problem-based learning. So I forgot to include the meaning of the uh, the problem-based learning. So what is the problem-based learning? Problem-based learning is a student-centered approach in which students learn about a subject by working in groups to solve an open-ended problem. So students will going to solve those open-ended problems or open-ended questions or gathering more information for them to learn or for them to come up with an idea or with a different idea. And also, this problem is what drives the motivation and their learnings. For example, a problem-based learning project could involve students pitching ideas and creating their own business plans to solve a societal need. So students could work independently or in a group to conceptualize, design, and launch their innovative product in front of classmates and community leaders. So why is problem-based learning important? In addition to this, problem-based learning can promote the development of critical thinking skills. So most of the student will improve their critical thinking skills, such as when they were going to learn some facts, they were going to analyze and they were going to think critically. Also, problem-solving abilities and communication skills as well. It can also provide opportunities for working in groups, finding and evaluating research materials, and lifelong learning. So as time goes by, it is according to Deutsch et al. 2001. So as time goes by, in this problem-based learning, most of the students will going to learn or will going to get this information and they will going to, madadala nila to hanggang sa tumanda sila, yung mga learnings na natututunan nila and all those experiences. So going back to that counterpoint problem-based learning, in an extensive study of problem-based medical program in the Netherlands, Schitt and his colleagues stated in 2009, they concluded that compared to graduates of conventional programs, graduates of problem-based learning program or counterpoint problem-based learning program performed better in practical, medical, and interpersonal skills. As what I mentioned earlier, they are improving in critical skills or thinking critically. So they took less time to graduate and had small positive differences in their medical knowledge and diagnostic reasoning. So most of them are business or masters in business administration students who learn a concept using problem-based methods were better at explaining the concept than students who had learned the concept from lecture and discussion. So what I mentioned earlier, those problem-based learning skills are open-ended problems or open-ended learnings wherein those students who will going to learn in this field or in this problem-based learning will going to think critically and will going to adapt those learnings that we will going to gather and they will going to analyze. So next slide, please. So yeah, students who are better at regulation may benefit more from problem-based methods. It is according to Evanson, Salisbury, Glennon, and Glenn 2001. But using problem-based methods over time can help all students to develop self-directed learning skills. Okay, next.
Next naman is yung collaboration and cooperation. So, even daw sa lahat ng ang concern today is about academic standard. Of course, ang academics pa rin daw is prime directive. Pero yung ability natin na makipag-participate and makipag-collaborate sa ibang tao is core during the 21st century. According yan kay Rochelle 2003. So, yung education daw today, kailangan maging prepare yung student nga to work collaboratively to all kinds of people. So, sabi, sa mostly ng mga corporation, they're looking sa employees na hindi lang good sa pagmamaster ng academic skills nila, pero yung meron ding ability to work harmoniously, di ba? Usually, nilalagay din natin sa resumes natin yung we can communicate well to other people. Kasi nga, isa din yan sa skills na dapat meron ng isang employee. Since yung 1970s pa daw, yung mga researchers na examine nila na ang collaboration and cooperation with school. And despite sa mga consistency, the majority ng study indicate na yung true cooperative group daw may positive effects from preschool to college. Ito yung students' empathy, yung feelings of acceptance, yung friendship nila, yung self-awareness, pati yung self-confidence. And then, it is also argued din na yung cooperative learning daw and experiences, crucial siya para i-prevent yung mga problems during children and adolescents. According naman yun kay Gilles, 2003 and 2004. Next slide. Next naman is about the collaboration, group work, and cooperative learning na. So yung term collaboration, group work, and cooperative learning daw ay often used as they have a same meaning. Pero certainly, some is nag-overlap. And of course, meron silang differences. So yung distinction daw between collaboration and cooperation is not always clear. So according kay Ted Panitz noong 1996, collaboration daw is philosophy about how we relate to other peoples and how we learn para tayo matuto and to work. So yung collaboration daw, it is way of dealing with people na nire-respect mo yung differences, yung authority, and then nagbi-build ka ng own knowledge na galing sa ibang tao. Yung collaboration naman, on the other hand, ito yung way of working with other people para ma-attain mo yung certain goal nyo. Ang collaborative learning daw ay nag-roots sa work ng mga British teacher na gusto nila, yung mga student nila is nagre-respond to literature in more active way as they learn, nagiging collaborative. Yung cooperative naman daw, learning, nag-root naman yun mismo sa mga American na si John Dewey and Kurt Lewin. You could say daw na cooperative learning is one way to collaborate in school. Yung group work naman daw ay it is simply daw yung mga several student is nagwo-work together. Parang pwedeng hindi sila nakakipag-cooperate or pwedeng nakikipag-cooperate sila basta they're simply working with each other. So, maraming activities na yung na-complete about this. For example, yung mga students na can work together to conduct yung local survey. So, pwedeng ang mga questions doon is about how do people feel about yung plan nila na makapag-build ng new mall pero para mas maraming shopping pero mas maraming traffic. So, pwede din yung how yung community would support or oppose yung building or mga nuclear plants. So, if yung student must learn na yung 10 new different definitions sa biological class, why would let them divide up in terms and definition to teach one another? So, dapat be sure daw na however na yung everyone sa group is kayang i-handle yung task. Kasi sometimes daw, yung work is parang ginagawa lang ng 1 to 2 students for the entire group na yon. So yung group work daw, pwedeng maging useful, pero yung true cooperative learning requires much more simply na putting yung students into group and dividing up yung work. So si Angela O'Donnell and Jim O'Kelly, describe yung mga teacher as the one na kiniklaim daw na ginagamit nila yung cooperative learning by in-ask nila yung mga students nila na mag-work nga by pairs on paper and then one each part. So, pero unfortunately, dito sa activity na to, di ba, nag-ask yung teacher na mag-work by pair. Pero individual part pa rin. Pero since yung teacher, nag-alat lang siya ng no time to work together and then no guidance, walang scaffolding in one lang cooperative social skills. So, syempre, magkaiba yung grade noon. Merong by group and merong by work. So yung students, merong nakakuha ng grade for the individual part and grade for the whole subject nga. And then yung one student, naka-receive siya ng A for sa part niya, pero C para doon sa by partner kasi hindi nakapagpasa yung partner niya. So yung one student na punish siya with C for a situation na hindi niya kayang i-control. Which is yung other one naman is na-reward as C. Rewarded na yun as C kasi nga hindi naman siya, 'di ba, kapag F dapat kapag hindi ka talaga nakapagpasa at all. Pero dahil sa groupmates niya nakapag-score pa rin siya ng C kahit na wala naman siyang work ginawa. And this is not, hindi daw yon cooperative learning and hindi rin naman group work. Next slide naman is what can go wrong. So ano naman yung mga misuses ng group learning? Without daw yung careful planning and monitoring ng teachers, yung group interaction daw can, of course, hinder yung learning and nakakapag-reduce yun ng mga social relations sa class. For example, if may pressure sa isang group community, perhaps merong issue and may mga students na nagdo-dominate sa isang community na yon. And then, syempre, of course, kapag may nagkakaroon ng issue, may nagdo-dominate, nagiging unproductive and unreflective yung isang group. And then, mga misconceptions daw kasi must be enforced at hindi lang dapat ina-ignore para din makorek yung understanding about sa mga misconceptions na yon. And then, next slide.
Yan. So, dito naman tayo sa task for cooperative learning. Yeah. So, to avoid problems, we must encourage cooperation from the students. And para magawa natin yun, dapat meron tayong effective na plan para makakuha tayo ng magandang goal. Yung task for cooperative groups, pwede siyang more or less structured. So, unahin na natin yung highly structured review and skill building task. For example, yung example nito is yung mga tasks na naaaral at napapractice, application na natututunan, computations from a given formula. Yun yung mga highly structured tasks kung saan merong specific answers. Yung mga extrinsic rewards such as praise, recognition, nakaka-enhance siya ng motivation so that the students will put more effort and will endure anything sa kahit anong situation. And it will also result for the increase of learning ng students. Next naman is yung ill-structured conceptual and problem-solving tasks. Itong mga tasks naman na ito includes multiple answers and clear procedures na nag-require ng problem finding and higher order thinking. Kabaligtaran siya ng highly structured task where may specific answers na and you should only follow the methods and all. Dito sa ill-structured, required kang mag-isip and mag-work together with other people to come up with an elaborated discussion and conclusion. Dito rin natin makikita yung true group task na kailangan lahat ng members na gagamit nila yung knowledge, skills, problem-solving strategies, and creativity nila, kaya bawat member matututo talaga and will have deeper understanding of the task. Open-ended techniques are highly recommended, such as reciprocal questioning, reciprocal teaching, pair share, and jigsaw, which will be tackled later on. And bukod sa mas nagiging productive siya, it also enables students to be more exposed in complex situations while exchanging interactions with other students. Again, nagpe-play rin ng malaking part ang extrinsic rewards dahil kung may reward na in-offer, mas ginagalingan ng students and doon mo makikita kung sino yung mga highest achieving students sa class. Next naman is yung social skills and communication task. Ayan, there are students na mas natututo pag mag-isa sila nag-aaral, tapos meron din mga students na mas natututo if they were surrounded with peers. Kasi diba, it's better to be with people who have the same goal as you. So, when the goal of peer learning is enhanced, social skills or increased intergroup understanding and appreciation of diversity, the assignment of specific roles and functions within the group might support communication. Mas mainam rin gawin is paiba-iba yung assigned jobs per student para lahat sila ay madedemonstrate nila kung ano yung kaya nilang gawin. Hindi lang si ganito, hindi si student A lang kasi siya yung magaling, hindi si student B lang kasi siya yung active. Parang lahat nabibigyan ng chance maging leader para ma-demonstrate nila kung ano talaga yung mga mas kaya pa nilang gawin. Dito naman sa social skills and communication task, hindi na rin importante dito yung rewards unlike sa mga naunang task. Kasi dito, ang pinaka-goal is maka-establish ng magandang community with a sense of respect and responsibility sa lahat ng members. Next.
So let's move on sa preparing students for cooperative learning. Next slide. So sabi ni David and Roger Johnson noong 2009, niname nila yung 5 elements that define true cooperative learning groups. Yun yung positive interdependence, promotive interaction, individual accountability, collaborative and social skills, and yung group processing. So, bigyan ko kayo ng example para mas maintindihan. Kunwari, yung classroom nyo sasali sa isang, sabihin na lang natin na cheer dance competition. So, kunwari, yung yung students dun sa isang room, hinati sila into groups. May mga students na magpa-perform at may mga students na for props and technical team, ganyan. So eventually, sa preparation, doon sa competition na yon, lahat ng students, nag-share sila ng similar goals. Ito nga yung makapag-perform sila ng maayos and syempre, ini-aim din nila na manalo. And yung act na yon, nagpapakita siya ng positive interdependence. Dahil sama-sama nilang ini-aim yung goal na para nga manalo. So, ina-encourage nila yung bawat isa na kaya natin yan, galingan natin sa ganito, o kaya pwede silang mag-make effort para mas ma-improve pa yung mga lacking parts ng dance or sa performance nila, ganyan, tuturuan nila yung bawat isa or pwede rin silang mag-share ng suggestions para mas ma-improve pa yung performance nila. And yung act na yun, nagpapakita siya ng promotive interaction. So ayun nga no, in learning the dance, hindi lang yung nakadepende sa choreographer nila or dun sa dance tricks instructor nila na in order na matutunan nila yun ng maayos and malinis, nila may perform yun, may individual effort din dapat silang gawin. Pwedeng after practice nila, may mga part na hindi nila gaano gamay, pwedeng sa bahay, practice nila yon ng mag-isa o kaya naman mag-make effort sila para yung mga hindi nila makuha na parts ganyan, pupuluduhin nila para makasabay sila sa pag-improve na makakatulong sa overall performance nila. Dahil bawat members na sasali sa competition is individually accountable. And pwede din yung sa props team, mag-iisip sila ng idea para sa costume and i-share nila yon sa mga classmate nila and then tatanggap sila ng criticisms and feedback sa kung ano ba talagang mas babagay and makakapagpaganda pa dun sa costume na gusto nila na i-achieve. And tawag dun is collaborative and social skills. Dahil napapalitan and nag-share sila ng idea na siyang makakapag-improve para dun sa gagawin nilang performance. And finally, throughout the preparation ng competition, may evaluation yan, like kakamusta nila yung mga nagawa na and kung may dapat pa bang gawin, ano pa yung mga lacking area, ano pang idea na magandang i-apply, ganun. And overall, kakamustahin yung bawat isa kung lahat ba is nagbibigay ng equal effort. Kasi mas effective na gawin para mag-function as a group and yun yung tinatawag na group process. Ginagawa yun para maging successful yung relationship ng bawat member sa isang grupo at matawag gayon na isang cooperative group. So next slide. So sa setting up cooperative groups, may tanong dyan yung how large should a cooperative group be? So, ang sagot is, it depends on the aim in setting up cooperative groups. Certain aspect must be considered such as the purpose, goal, and gender. May mga aspect na dapat i-consider sa pag-set ng cooperative groups, katulad ng purpose, goal, tapos yung gender nga. Sabihin na lang natin yung example kanina, di ba, yung sa cheer dance, ang purpose nila is to give a performance on the competition. Tapos yung goal nila is to win the competition. And yung sa gender, hinati, di ba, into two yung members. Yung groups na magpe-perform, tapos yung mga groups na for props team. So, pwede doon na balance yung girls and boys doon and na-distribute ng maayos yung mga tasks na maka-assign sa kanila. Yung mga aspect na to, essential to na i-consider para mas maging successful yung pagbuo ng cooperative groups. Next po. So, sa giving and receiving explanations naman, giving good explanations appears to be more important for learning than receiving explanations. Sabi yan ni Donna 2006, Web, Faribar, Master George 2002. Tapos, good explanations are relevant, timely, correct, and elaborated enough to help the listener correct misunderstandings. The best explanations tell why. Sabi ni Webb et al. 2002 and ni Master George 2003. So, ang effective learning and teaching, nakaugat to sa pagbigay ng good and clear explanations. Importante din na hindi lang si teacher yung bigay ng explanation. So, interacting to the students na may magandang batuhan ng thoughts and ideas is a way sa pagkakaroon ng magandang transmission ng learning. And ang mga students, importante rin na magtanong sila sa mga bagay na hindi nila gaanong maintindihan para malapatan sila ng explanation and information para masagot yung tanong na gusto nilang i-clear. Dahil sabi nga, students who ask questions, get answers, and attempt explanations are more likely to learn than students whose questions go unasked or unanswered. Mas natututo daw yung mga estudyanteng nagtatanong o nagpapaklear sa mga area na hindi nila gaanong na-catch sa mga teacher kaysa sa mga students na hahayaan na lang na hindi na-clear na magre-remain lang to na unclear and unsolved. So, asking good questions and giving clear explanations are critical and usually, these skills must be taught. So, in order na ma-organize yung explanation na gusto mong i-provide sa mga students, kailangan magbigay ng mga relevant examples, yung mga things na makaka-relate sila and mga analogy na madaling intindihin sa part ng mga students. And syempre, be creative sa pag-elaborate ng mga information dahil doon nakakapagbigay na ng clear explanation si teacher sa kanyang students. Next po. So sa assigning roles, in using roles, it is important that it support learning and roles are supports for learning not ends in themselves. Sabi ni Woolfolk Hoy and Moran noong 1999. Some teachers, nag-a-assign sila ng roles sa mga students para makaka-encourage para sa cooperation and participation. Kunwari, sa isang classroom, yung mga student officer, di ba, may kanya-kanya silang role na inassign in order na mag-function at mapanatili yung organization within the classroom. Kasi in using roles, nakafocus to in the support of persistent encouragement and participation. Next po. So ito makikita dito yung mga pwedeng ibigay ni teacher na roles depending sa kung ano yung purpose ng group na makakatulong sa students para maki-cooperate at matuto inside doon sa nabuong cooperative group nga. Next slide.
Next slide naman is yung design for cooperation. So dito, sa design for cooperation, nag-develop daw ng deep understanding sa cooperative group. So nagre-require daw na lahat ng members is need na makipag-participate. And then yung discussion daw, it should support learning na nag-include ng talk to sa interpret, nagko-connect, nag-explain, and of course, nag-provide ng mga evidences. So, yung first is yung about sa reciprocal questioning. So, yung reciprocal questioning, nag-require siya ng no special materials or mga testing procedures daw can be used sa wide range ng age ng edad. So, after daw ng yung teacher makapag-present ng lesson, yung student daw is, iba pinipare na sila by triad or pairs, and then nag-a-ask ng questions and answers about sa material. So yung teacher, nagpro-provide siya ng mga questions, and then yung students ay nagde-develop din ng mga specific questions based dun sa lesson na naturo ng teacher nila. And then yung student, nagke-create sila ng questions nga. And then they take turns answering ng mga questions na rin na yun. And then yung process na yun kasi nagiging mas effective sa mga traditional discussion group, sa mga traditional classroom, because nakakapag-encourage yun ng deep thinking about sa material. So yung question na nandito na nakikita nyo sa figure 10.2, ito is ini-encourage yung mga student na magkaroon ng connection between sa lesson and sa mga previous knowledge na na-experience nila. And pwede itong maging example. So yung example, di ba, as what I mentioned kanina, na after ng discussion ng teacher, ito yung mga pwedeng questions na itanong. So, ayan, basahin na lang din na first is yung what is an everyday application of, yung how can you define the blank in your own words, and then what are the advantage and disadvantages, and so on. Next slide. Next slide naman is yung jigsaw. So, si Elliot Aronson and yung mga graduate student nila, sila daw yung naka-invent ng jigsaw classroom, in which si Aronson daw is yung professor sa social psychology. So dito, si Aronson, dinevelop niya yung approach na as a matter of absolute necessity to help diffuse a high explosive situation. Kasi sa Austin School, nagsama-sama daw sa isang classroom yung mga whites, African American, and yung mga Hispanic student. And then ang naging answer nga dito ni Aronson is yung na-invent niya na jigsaw classroom. So sa jigsaw, yung each member daw is merong part ng material nila para pag-aralan nila, and then sa whole group. So yung mga students nagiging expert daw sila on their own piece. Syempre yung binibigay na piece is based on sa kanilang culture. And then because yung mga students na yon, they have to learn and be tested in every piece of larger puzzle, kasi diba ang jigsaw ay puzzle. So ang contribution ng bawat isa ay importante. And then ang student dito is truly interdependent. And then sa most recent version ng jigsaw, nag-add to ng expert group in which yung students na responsible para sa same material from each learning group, they make sure na naiintindihan yung mga assigned part, and then they plan then to teach information sa group members nila. And then next, yung student return their learning groups and then bringing expertise doon na sa session. And then in the end, yung mga students, they take individual tests covering all the materials and earn points for learning the team scores. So yung teams can work for reward or simply just for recognition lang. Next slide. Next naman is yung constructive or the structured controversies, or yung learning from academic and interpersonal conflict. So sa constructive conflict daw, essential to sa classroom kasi ang conflict naman is inevitable, syempre, and then it is also necessary really for learning. Kasi diba, in every learning na tututunan natin, always present yung problem. Like in research, diba, parang we research because we want to find the answer to a certain problem. And bakit pa nga ba tayo nag-research? Wala naman palang problem na nag-a-arise doon sa gusto nating i-research. And then si Pedri, yung theory niya, sinasabi dito na developing knowledge requires nga daw ay cognitive conflict. So, sa isang study, yung mga 10th graders na mga students who were wrong, pero may different reasons sila about sa pinag-aaralan nila. And they're able to correct yung misunderstanding na yon by pakikipag-argue din about sa mga wrong answers ng ibang students. So, yung individual, they are trying to exist in a group with interpersonal conflict. And then, we can also lead nga to learning. Kasi syempre, although pare-parehas na wrong yung answers nila, nalalaman nila yung basis ng mga wrong answers na yon. And then, of course, afterwards, mas nagiging malinaw sa kanila na wrong yung misunderstanding nila. And then, wrong yung understanding nila, sorry. And then, yung research over yung mga last 40 years, nag-demonstrate din na yung constructive controversy din in classroom, nag-lead nga ng greater learning kasi mas nagiging open and nalalaman natin nga yung perspective ng ibang tao. And then dito, sa table na to, 10.4, ito, it shows yung mga academic interpersonal conflicts and yung mga positive forces in learning community. Na each pair daw ng student ay merong issue and then nagde-develop sila ng pro and con situation and then pinapresent nila yon sa mismong position nila na merong evidences. Next slide. Next naman is yung reaching every student using yung cooperative learning wisely. So, yung cooperative learning daw always benefit from yung careful planning. Pero sometimes nag-i-include din to ng mga students with special need. And then, of course, yung mga students with special need, nagre-require sila ng extra attention to planning and preparation. So, for example, sa isang cooperative structure, kahit na scripted yung mga questioning and merong peer tutoring, yung interaction between those is nahihirapan pa rin to be taught. So in this sa ganong klase interactions, you want to see and hear explain yung kung paano mag-explain yung teachers. Hindi lang pwede na just by giving them the right answer. Kasi many of the intellectual students with learning disability, nahihirapan sila, of course, ma-understand yung new concepts. And then, pwede na yung mga bata is easily to be frustrated and pwede ding magkaroon ng social rejection lalo na kung nasa mixed classroom setup sila. And then yung mga gifted students naman, they can also benefit then from the cooperative learning kasi when groups are mixed, kapag naka-mix together kasi para sa kanila since gifted students sila, minsan yung pace nung discussion is too slow or nagiging parang too simple yung task sa kanila and it's just too much sa kanilang repetition. Kasi kahit naman nasa normal classroom, madami pa rin tanong yung mga students. And since gifted students sila na isang turo pa lang nagigets na nila, parang easily irritated sila kapag paulit-ulit yung nagiging discussion. And then in addition, yung mga gifted students often fall into the role ng teacher nga din and then end up doing na sila na mismo yung gumawa for the whole group. Next slide. Next slide naman is yung dilemma na of constructivist practice. So yung si Larry Kremen noong 1961, na-observe niya na yung progressive and innovative pedagogies requires ang infinite skills ng teacher. So today daw, yung mga constructivist teacher parang uses variety of constructivist practices. So we also know din na yung mga teacher today happens to be in a context na high strict and testing and accountability. Sa ganung klaseng situation, yung mga constructivist teacher kasi, they face many challenges na. So, according kay Mark Winchlet, noong 2002, nag-identify siya ng 4 teaching dilemmas. So, nandyan siya sa table number 1005. So, merong 4. So, first is yung conceptual dilemmas. Ito yung teacher, paano ba nila mini-make sense yung cognitive versus yung mga social conception na nagiging importante pa kung paano yung mental processes ng isang bata or paano ba nag-work together yung isang bata. Second is yung pedagogical. Ito yung how yung isang teacher is truly constructivist, ways that both honor students in attempt to think for themselves. Pero na-ensure pa rin ba neto yung learning materials ng mga bata. And third, yung cultural. So ano yung mga activities ba na right, ano yung mga cultural knowledge, and then ano yung ways para makapag-build ng community sa isang diverse na classroom. And then of course, yung political dilemma. So paano nga ba matuturo ng isang teacher yung deep understanding and critical thinking but still nasa-satisfy pa rin yung mga accountability na nade-demands ng parents and then nagre-requires ng state achieving testing. Next slide.
Okay, so now let's move forward to the service learning or the next topic, which is the service learning. So I'm going to define first what is service learning. So it is a way of teaching and learning that benefits not only the students but also the surrounding community as well. From the word itself, service, and then you will going to learn through that process wherein you provide service to the community or to the other person. It works by teaching concepts in the classroom, which can be applied within that community. So as a result, it is mutually beneficial to everyone involved or the community itself, as what I mentioned. So service learning combines academic learning with personal and social development for secondary and college students. It is according to Woolfolk, Hoy, Demerath, and PAP 2002. A more formal definition of service learning is a teaching and learning strategy that integrates meaningful community service with instruction and reflection to enrich the learning experience, teach civic responsibility, and strengthen communities. So, in this service learning, the definition itself, as what I mentioned, is providing service to the community and also is strengthen communities, and they will going to gather a lot of information when they provide service or when they experience that specific learning. Okay, and then participation also in service learning can promote political and moral development for adolescents, such as service learning projects. Adolescents experience and their own competence and agency by working with others in need. So students see themselves as political and moral agents rather than as merely good citizens. It is according to Eunice and Yates, 1997. So why this researchers say that or stated that? Because as time goes by, when students will going to learn or will going to provide service, they will going to engage themselves because it is a commitment. When they provide service to the community, they are committed or they are into that specific field because they are not doing it for themselves because of that what do you call this, for that just like compliance. They are doing this because they really want to or they love to, and they also want to learn through that experience. And aside from that, um in addition, service learning can help adolescents think in new ways about their relationships with people who are unlike them, and thus can lead them to become more tolerant of differences. It is according to Turney, 1993. So in this study also, or according to Turney, it was stated that students will going to think critically also because they will going to identify the differences of other people when they are going to interact with the community or when they are going to interact with other people. They will going to analyze everything through that experiences. They will going to engage themselves and they will going to realize everything aside from the learning that they will gather or that they will going to experience. And finally, service learning experiences foster an ethic of care that can result in a growing commitment to confront difficult social problems. So, in this sense, student involvement in service learning can motivate and empower adolescents to critically reflect on their role in society. So, as what I mentioned earlier, it is a commitment. When you provide service to the community or to the person that you will going to provide experience, it is a commitment because it's on the next slide I will going to explain everything that it's not just for the sake of compliance or for the you know what do you call this, for just 2 days. It is a long term. For example, you will going to provide or you will going to give service to the community. You will not going to provide service for just 2 days or something, like you will going to have a tutor, because as time goes by you will going to learn or you will going to make a progress on what will you going to do on the next or on the moving forward process. And then next slide, please. Yeah. So this is what I'm talking about. So the guidelines, family, and community partnerships. So on this part, wherein the service should be ongoing, not just a brief project. So as what I mentioned earlier, this one or those examples are, instead of having a 2-week food drive with a party for the class that collected the most, encourage a longer commitment to cook or serve food at shelters for homeless families. And then next one is contact local agencies to identify real needs that your students could address, or search online by zip code or volunteermatch.org. So with this or in this statement, it is a commitment and it is a long-term process, and each and every day you will going to learn, and you will on your own experience, and you will gather all those learnings and you will apply it to yourself as well. The second one is consider virtual volunteering. See serviceleader.org/virtual yada yada yada. So examples are translate a document into another language, provide multimedia expertise such as preparing a PowerPoint, QuickTime, or other computer-based presentation, and then design an agency's newsletter or brochure, or copy edit an agency's publication or proposal. And fourth one is proofread drafts of papers and online publications. Fifth is research and write articles for brochures, newsletters, websites. And the last one is design a logo for an agency or program, or fill other illustration needs. So those examples are very important when you are going to conduct a virtual volunteering or virtual gathering, wherein you will going to provide service, or you will going to tackle about service learning to the other person or to the community itself, because it is not just like a game that you will going to conduct. It is a learning or a true to life based experience, wherein you will going to tackle about your experience, about your learnings in life, that other people might getting or going to get an experience to, or a motivation to strive harder whenever they will going to learn something or explore something new. And then the next one is be aware of service learning projects in school. Make sure learning is at the center. So for example, have clear learning objectives for the projects. And then examine grade level standards in science, history, health, literature, and other areas to see how some might be met through service projects. For example, how might concepts in biology be learned through designing a nutrition education project for senior citizens or preschool students? And then the third one is, do students reflect over time about their experiences, keep journals, write or draw what they have learned, and include these reflections in class discussion. So in this case, make sure that all of the learnings or all of the topics is in line to that specific experience or to that specific service learning, because many people or many students will going to gather those information, and they will going to review it as time goes by, for them to have a um, basic knowledge or base knowledge, wherein they will going to um, use it on the future references. And then the next is make sure the service draws on your child's talents and skills, so that it is actually valuable to the recipients, and he or she gains a sense of accomplishment and usefulness from applying skills to help others. So, for example, youth who have artistic talents might help redecorate a game room at a senior citizens center. And then individuals who are good storytellers could work with children at a daycare center, or in a children's clinic. And then lastly, students who are bilingual might help teachers translate school newsletters into the languages of fellow students, families, or serve as translators at local clinics. So dito na po papasok yung passion. Passion ng isang student, it's not just about the learning itself, because it is a passion wherein gusto talaga nila yung ginagawa nila. Wherein natututo sila, gusto nila yung ginagawa nila, at the same time natututo sila, because they will gather some of the information. Aside from that, nakakatulong pa sila sa ibang tao or doon sa community na kailangan nilang tutukan or tulungan. And then last is design service learning opportunities so they are inclusive. It is according to Diamond, Densaglia, and Shun 2007. So those three examples are consider transportation needs for children with disabilities, and link service learning projects to life skills such as social skills on the job, safety, and punctuality. And encourage teachers to monitor interactions in groups for all students. Be aware of how students with special needs are included. So dito na po papasok yung mga yung mga may special needs, wherein hindi dapat natin sila dinidisregard in this field, because they are also important, or they will, malay natin, di ba, they will going to help other people as well. So it is very important to include each and every one of us, because all of us are all human being, and we might have differences, right? But we are all equal. We treat other people as equal, or we what do you call this? Parang tinatrato tayo or tinatrato natin ang bawat isa na normal lang. So in that case, malay natin na on those students that has a special needs, you will going to learn something, right? Because those peoples are very intelligent when it comes to those learnings. So next slide, please.
Yun. Next naman natin is yung technology and learning. Next slide po. So may tanong dyan, no? Sabi, does technology use support academic learning? The answer is complex and surprising. Dahil nga may mga nagpo-prove na yes, nag-i-improve nga yung learning with the use of technology, pero may kalakip na effects ito sa ibang students. Computers in general can be useful talaga in teaching and learning. It can be effective use as well, pero being reliable lang sa computers, hindi siya automatically nakakapag-increase ng academic achievement. So sabi rin, no, computers are more likely to increase achievement if they support the basic processes that lead to learning: active engagement, frequent interaction with feedback, authenticity and real-world connection, and productive group work. Based siya na sabi ni Jackson et al. 2006, Rochelle et al. 2000, Tamim, Bernard, Purok, Cosby, Abrami, and Sneed, 2011. So sabi, no, computers makes our life more easier and convenient. Yes, totoo yan. But in terms of learning, not because na gumagamit ka ng computer, mag-increase na yung learning mo. Yes, definitely na it helps and it will be more effective if magkakaroon ng active engagement, frequent interaction and feedback. And sample na natin ngayon yung online class tayo, di ba? Phones, tablets, and computers, yun yung mga nagiging resources for learning. Dito, nagiging mahirap kasi nagiging mas limited yung interaction between the teachers and the students. Dahil may limitation nga, may option kasi na like off-cam or off-mic ganyan in the end of each other. Kaya mas maganda talaga mag-isip ng magandang activities or tasks na makakapag-introduce ng fun and learning classroom environment using ang technology. Next slide po. So technology-rich environments. Ano ba yung technology-rich environments? Ito yung environments that includes virtual worlds, computer simulations that support problem-based learning, intelligent tutoring system, educational games, audio recordings, wikis, handheld wireless devices, and multimedia environments. Next po. So yung 3 kinds of uses for technology in school. First is yung teachers can design technology-based activities for their classrooms, for virtual learning environments, or for blended models using both in-class and virtual environments. Example dito siguro yung Kahoot or yung ibang mga online learning class na makakapag-engage sa mga students kasi mas maganda yung flow ng teaching dahil mas nag-enjoy na sila tapos natututo pa sila. So second use of technology in school is yung students can interact with technologies in a variety of ways, such as by using a computer or tablet to complete assignments or by collaborating in a virtual environment with other students or teachers using interactive cloud computing applications. Google Classroom is the best example para dito, kung saan nagbibigay ng task, nag-implement ng interaction, and nakapag-collaborate with each student using this computer application. So third one is yung administrators use technology to track teachers, class and student information in school, district, or statewide systems. Technology made use din for the information. Yung sa mga registrar, minomonitor nila yung status ng students kung active pa ba, nag-leave of absence, or nag-drop. Mas napapadali yung pag-monitor with the use of technology. Kaya super big help talaga ang technology sa school. So next po. Doon naman sa virtual learning environments. It is a broad term that describes many ways of learning in virtual system. The most traditional VLE is referred to as Learning Management System. LMS deliver e-learning using applications such as Moodle, Blackboard, R Campus, and Discipline. So, lalayo pa ba tayo, So sa atin naman, kasi itong mga Moodle, Blackboard, R Campus, nasa ato US context. Ganyan. Yung sa atin naman, yung Canvas, kung saan doon easily nakikita natin yung mga subjects na naka-enroll tayo, naka-intend na din doon yung mga tasks to do kasi may calendar, tapos yung mga files and modules, mas madaling nako-compile and napopost. Meron din doon yung engagement tab kung saan pwedeng magamit yon in communicating with students. And in that way yung online class na-survive natin and easily organize na yung distribution ng activities sa bawat subject na nagiging convenient for both teachers and also for sa students. So meron sa module yung Betty's Brain is a fascinating example of VLE developed by Vanderbilt and Stanford Universities. Meron doon yung example yung si Betty. Si Betty, computer-based system siya kung saan na-challenge yung mga students na magturo ng science topics sa isang computer agent. And yun nga, si Betty, yung system na yun, nag-provide siya ng resources para mas mapadali yung planning para sa concept na ituturo ng students kay Betty. Nakapokus sila sa concept kasi na the best way to learn something is to teach it. Kaya si Betty yung nagiging way nila para may apply itong approach na to. And using Betty nga, natatrack din nila kung paano yung nagiging transmission ng learning sa pagsagot ni Betty ng activities based sa natutunan niya doon sa student teacher na nagturo sa kanya. Titingnan kung effective yung pagturo ni student teacher using Betty. So next slide po. Yung sa personal learning environment naman, a personal learning environment framework provides tools that support individualized learning in a variety of contexts and situations. The learners assume control of how and when their learning occurs. Sa tinatawag na independent learning, mas natuturuan natin tungkol sa mga concepts yung sarili natin, pwede din ditong to sa pag-review ng mga natutunan within the classroom. Sabi mas na-absorb ng mga students yung knowledge depende sa preference nila. Kunwari, may time of the day lang siya na nag-aaral. Sabihin na natin na paggabi kasi mas tahimik, ganyan, or doon lang siya yung available time niya, ganun. Mas gusto niya sa gabi mag-aaral kasi may iba naman. Gusto kumakain habang nare-review kasi mas natatandaan nila yung mga binabasa nila. Ganun. Meron naman yung gusto may background music, ganyan, para mas alive. Yung iba gusto nagkakape kasi para mas gising sila. Tapos nagpo-function siya pag gano'n. So depende talaga sa preference talaga ni student kung paano yung approach na gagawin niya sa pag-set ng kanyang personal learning environment. So tools that support PLEs include computer-based training, modules, e-books, cognitive tutors, quizzes, and self-assessment tools. So ito rin, ito, sa tools na gagamitin, depende pa rin ito sa preference ni student. Yung iba, mas gusto directly sa computer na nila ini-input yung assignments nila. Iba naman gusto pen and paper muna. Kaya it depends talaga kay students kung paano magiging approach niya dun sa personal learning environments niya. Next po. So sa immersive learning environments naman, immersive virtual learning environment is a simulation of a real-world environment whose purpose is to learn through enculturation. Complex type ito ng virtual learning environment na kaninang pinaliwanag ko dahil nakaset ito into real-world environment. Kunwari, example natin yung mga resident doctors. Diba, nakaset na sila in the real work settings. Kaya, mas nag-challenge sila na mas nadadagdagan yung learning nila at nasusolve nila yung problems by proper guidance ng senior doctors nila. Yung culture and environment sa loob ng hospital, unti-unti na nila itong ma-adapt. So, if maging full doctor na sila, hindi na sila mahirapan mag-adjust. Ganun din kasi yung goal nitong immersive virtual environment is ang goal kasi nito is to expose students in the professional practicum para mas maging ready sila pag naging professional na sila. So these immersive environments often include cognitive tutors. The technology is programmed to interact as a tutor by providing prompts after analyzing the student's response. Next po.
So for the next topic is developmentally appropriate computer activities for young children. So digital media are appealing, but are they appropriate for preschool children? This is a hotly debated issue. Computers should not be used to do solitary drill and practice activities. Developmentally appropriate ways to use computers with 3 and 4-year-olds 4-year-old differ from the ways we use computers in kindergarten and the primary grades. So, with the developmentally appropriate computer activities, young children can benefit cognitively without sustaining losses in creativity. It is according to Hoglan and Wright, 1997. So, some software for children should include simple spoken directions. Some of the activities should be open-ended and encourage discovery, exploration, problem solving, and understanding the cause and effect. Why researchers say this or stated this one or this statement? Because some of the young children will going to explore new things or will going to learn some new things or they will going to what do you call this? They will going to explore everything on that specific computer activities that researchers or that person will going to conduct in that specific field. So also, children should be able to remain in control of the activities through a variety of responses because in this case, students also will going to or we're going to have a control wherein they will going to respond in the specific learnings that they will going to answer or they will going to have what do you call this have a participation in that line. So finally, the content should be appropriate for the respectful of diverse cultures, ages, and abilities. It is according to M.A. Fisher et al. 2012. And as per Linda, or according to Linda Francis and her colleagues, suggest that you ask this question about any program you are considering. So does this software program help create learning opportunities that did not exist without it? So why did Linda Francis ask this question, wherein the software program is going to help those students or those young children that they were going to learn in that specific software because they are the recipients or they are the one or the target of that software wherein they will going to learn some things or they will going to explore some things so that as time goes by, they will going to or madadala nila iyon sa paglaki nila or what do you call this? Madadala nila yon sa mga susunod pa nilang topics or learnings na matatakal nila as time goes by. And then there is another important consideration. Thus, the program's multimedia features such as embedded videos, zoom ins, music, added sounds, or some sound effects or images add to learning or take away from it. So, as per researchers, one danger is that programs will include attractive visuals or sound effects that actually interrupt and interfere with the development of important concepts. So, di ba, most students or most young children are more attracted to that sound effects or visual presentations than to that rather than to the specific content of that topic. So, um, for example, do the sounds of buzz saw and the thud of a falling tree in a Peter Rabbit storytelling program foster distractibility and interfere with understanding the story, plot, and characters? Because as what I mentioned, di ba, mas na-attract yung mga students or yung mga kabataan or young children sa mga effects na nakikita nila doon sa isang software. Parang mas nagpo-focus sila doon sa effects or those videos rather than how they can understand those specific topic na nag-flash doon sa screen. So, or doon sa book rather. So, research in the Netherlands stated also, however, demonstrated that multimedia storybooks can provide support for understanding stories and remembering linguistic information for kindergarten students from families with low educational levels who are behind in language and literacy skills. It is according to Verhalen Boss and De Jong 2006. So the difference in this study seemed to be that multimedia features of the story supported understanding and memory by providing multiple pathways to meaning, giving visual and verbal representations of key story elements, focusing attention in important information, and reinforcing key ideas. So as what I mentioned earlier, di ba, mas nagfo-focus yung mga students or yung mga young children doon sa mga effects. However, they will going to gather or they will really need to understand what is the topic all about or what is the story all about, because it is how learning works or how they will going to learn on that specific topic that they are watching or that they are going to see on the books or on the videos that they are going to watch or to read. Also, this extra scaffolding may be especially important for students with limited language and literacy skills. So the bottom line is that multimedia elements should focus on meaning and not just provide attractive bells and whistles. So in this tagline, wherein you should most multimedia creators should be more focused on meaning rather than providing those attractiveness that students or that young children might be distracted or might be engaged um, rather than engaging themselves on how they can understand or how they can learn to that specific knowledge. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, dito naman tayo sa computers and older students. So, ayan, a study that used real-time event sampling to assess internet usage found that older adolescents spend about 60 minutes a day on the internet, but the time varied by ethnicity. Adolescents of color used the internet about 50% more, or around 100 minutes per day on average, compared to white adolescents. The most common activities were visiting social networking sites, working on school assignments, browsing, email, and streaming video. Surprisingly, participants in the study self-reported between 3 and 4 hours a day of internet use, so their self-reports exaggerated the time spent. Pero sabi rin sa study na to na hindi porket ang young adults ay nag-aalat ng time to use social media platforms ay nagagamit na nila ng tama yung mga social networking sites for doing their assignments. Kasi sabi dito, karamihan sa mga students ay nag-undergo ng butterfly defect or yun yung nag-start ka sa isang link, tapos may nakita kang isa pang interesting link, tapos pumindot ka pa ng isa pang interesting link hanggang sa nagsunod-sunod na at nalimutan mo na kung ano ba talaga yung gagawin or yung i-research mo. But meron din ibang forms of technology na engaging. Sa isang study naman ni Song and Mayer noong 2013, napatunayan na yung mga students na gumagamit ng mobile device on studying is more involved and willing to continue kaysa sa mga students na nagsa-study using desktop computers. Kasi, kapag nga naman kasi diba gumagamit ka ng computer, mas malaki yung screen, mas gusto mo na marami kang nakikita, kaya sige mo lang ng pindot kung saang links. Next one is computational thinking and coding. Dahil nga sa patuloy na pag-unlad ng technology, ang gustong mangyari ng mga teachers ay matuto ng computational thinking yung mga estudyante. So yung computational thinking, it is defined as the thought processes involved in formulating problems so their solutions can be represented as computational steps and algorithms. In other words, thinking like a computer scientist. Some educators din kasi naniniwala na sila na yung programming nakaka-help siya sa students to think logically in most areas. Pero yung ibang educators naman, naniniwala lang sila na ang natututunan lang sa programming ay mag-program and wala nang iba. Pero kahit ganun, meron pa ring interest na yung coding and programming nakakatulong siya to advocate computational thinking sa mga estudyante. Ayan, dito naman sa guidelines in using computers, tinatake lang yung mga dapat gawin if you have computers at classroom, such as hiring experts in computers, encouraging 2 students to work together rather than alone, making sure that all the students have a chance to use computer, and teaching them how to show their identities online. At school or at home kasi, dapat natuturuan ng students on how to protect themselves online, especially sa panahon ngayon na sobrang dali na ng access sa mga online crimes, cyber crimes. And yun yung one of the disadvantage ng continuous development ng digital or social media. Pwede niyong basahin yan and madali naman siyang maintindihan. Next naman is yung media and digital literacy. Yan, with the advent of digital media comes a new concern with literacy, media or digital literacy. Today, to be literate, to be able to read, write, and communicate, children have to read and write in many media, not just printed words. Films, videos, DVDs, computers, photographs, artwork, magazines, music, TV, billboards, and more communicate through images and sounds. How do children read these messages? This is a new area of research and application in educational and developmental psychology. Kasi diba, sa senior high school, merong subject na media and information literacy, which tackles about kung paano tayo maging critical thinkers on the information we have obtained online and paano natin yun i-evaluate or i-analyze and paano natin siya magagamit in an ethical way. Take for example yung project Look Sharp at Ithaca College directed by Cynthia Shib. Si Cynthia Shib ay isang developmental psychologist and yung pinaka-goal ng project niya, nung project Look Sharp, is to provide materials, training, and support as teachers integrate media literacy and critical thinking about media in their class lessons. So, yung Project Look Sharp, meron siyang suggested questions na hindi ko na nilagay sa PPT, but ano siya? Siya yung anim siya. So, yung first question, who made and who sponsored this message and why was it made? Who paid for it? Second, who is the target audience and how do you know? Third, what are the different techniques used and why are they used? Fourth, what messages are communicated and or implied? What is your interpretation and why? Fifth, how current, accurate, and credible is the information in this message? And lastly, what is left out of the message that might be good to know? Yan. So, ito naman yung guidelines supporting the development of media literacy. Dito naman sa guidelines na to, dinidiscuss yung how should we use media, such as practicing general observation, critical thinking, analysis, perspective taking, and production skills. Tapos, kung paano dapat ginagamit yung media to stimulate interest in a new topic, kung paano nakakatulong sa students yung media, nakakatulong, how it help students identify what they already know or believe about a topic based on popular media content, paano magiging standard pedagogical tool yung media, and how media affects history. And that concludes our topic, the learning sciences and constructivisms. Thank you for listening.